Okay, hi everyone. All right, so today we're going to go over the documents that I received from the Manitoba College of Social Work. Now, there's quite a few of them, so we might do this in parts. I don't know, um, but we'll see where it goes. Okay, so um, now this document, it's interesting. Um, so back in, let me think here. Back in May, um, nope, sorry, not May. Back in, I believe, hang on a second, let me just double check this 'cause I don't want to misspeak. So back when I was going to court for the house, um, the final hearing in regards to the house, um, the College of Social Workers server met me at the courtroom door. Now, this is a perfect example on how I said, the Manitoba government is utilizing the King of Courts bench and its different agencies to constantly attack me. Literally, there's no break, there's no reprieve. It's literally one attack on top of the other. So back on March 19th, or sorry, March 6th, okay? So back on March 6th, um I and you know what? I just want to point this out that it was also my daughter's birthday on that day. Okay? The same daughter that was in hospital, it was her birthday on that day. So they take every chance they can to just try to hit me, to try and hurt me even more. Okay? So now um Now, on March 6th, the Manitoba College of Social Workers got a server to meet me at the door of the courtroom prior to the hearing to serve me these documents. And everybody knows that I don't like courtrooms now. It gives me extreme anxiety because of all the stuff that I've been through. Um, so I mean, this was just, I viewed it as absolute harassment because it was a way for them to try and throw me off, to try and throw me off so that I couldn't focus on what I needed to that day. It was harassment. Um, sorry, I'm just gonna try and get back to the document. Okay, so this is what I was served. It's a notice of hearing, and we're going to go through all this. So it says, take notice that a hearing will be held by a panel of members of inquiry committee established by the board of directors of the Manitoba College of Social Work to consider charging to consider charges of professional misconduct authorized against you by a subcommittee of the board of directors of the college. If you are found guilty of professional misconduct, you may be dealt with by an inquiry panel under the provisions of the Social Work Professions Act. A statement of charges forms part of this notice as it follows: that you, the said Susan Miasga, registered with the college at the City of Winnipeg in the province of Manitoba on July 15th, 2020, under provisions of the Social Work Professions Act, and being a member of the college by your actions and particularized herein, did commit professional misconduct, in that You exploited others to further your own personal interests, contrary to the Code of Ethics, Guideline 2, Ethical Responsibilities in Professional Relationships, specifically Clause 2.22. So we're just going to quickly go over to the Manitoba College of Social Workers Code of Ethics and read what it says there. I know what it says, but just so that everybody else does. And I'll be posting a link to this document in the notes of this in the notes of this video. So it says social workers do not take unfair advantage of a professional relationship or exploit others to further their own personal, religious, political, or business interests. Okay, so professional relationship. This wasn't a professional relationship. In the capacity of the hospital, the professionals would have been the nurses and doctors. I was a parent trying to see my child. I was not acting in a professional capacity. I was with my child. I was with my family. Um, so I mean, this clause does not um, this clause does not apply. Also, I don't feel I exploited anybody. Um, Exploitation means that somebody is gaining something while the other one is losing. So I didn't gain anything. I still was not able to see my daughter. I and if they're saying that um well, I still spoke out about it. Yes, I did speak out about it, as is my Canadian rights under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms Act. I do have freedom of speech. Now, the college can turn around and say, "Well, this is our code of ethics. This is our policy." Yeah, it is a provincial policy that does not supersede a the federal Charter of Rights and Freedoms. If they're saying that as a social worker I do not have the same rights as every other Canadian citizen, there is a problem there. So this clause doesn't really apply. Okay, getting back to the document. You created a YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, a shame of Canada, as a means as a means of advocacy for you and your children, as a way to document that you fought for your children and a way for your children to know more about you. In your public YouTube video, Health Sciences Center only allows parents up to 2 hours a day with daughter who is in MICU, published to your YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, A Shame of Canada, on January 22nd, 2023. You identify a nurse manager, and a weekend social worker at the Health Science Center by first name. You know what? I thought it was being really nice by just identifying them by first name, because how many Hollies are there in Manitoba? I'm sure there's more than one. Um, I'm sure there's more than one working at Health Science Center in Winnipeg. In your public YouTube video, Health Science Center denies mother access to daughter in MICU followed weekend of discrimination, published to your YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, Shame of Canada, on January 23rd, 2023, you identify an MICU social worker at the Health Sciences Center by first name. In your public YouTube video, Health Science Center discriminates against parent refusing access while daughter is in MICU, published to your YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, The Shame of Canada, on January 23rd, 2023. You identify a patient relations officer in MICU, social worker at the Health Science Center by first name. Again, how many Johns are there in Manitoba? How many Hollies? How many Susans? Uh, this is irrelevant. Now, if I use their last name, maybe, but um, even then, it is questionable because I mean, again, I have the freedom to speak out. I have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms Act, and I am a Canadian citizen. I do have the right to freedom of speech. And if the Manitoba College of Social Workers is saying that their code of ethics supersedes the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that means that every single social worker who works in Manitoba out there does not have the same rights as every single other Canadian. Um, in your public YouTube video, mother discriminates against refused or in your public YouTube video, mother discriminates against refused information from HSC, published to your YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, The Shame of Canada, on January 26, 2023. You identify a patient relation and nurse manager at the Health Science Center by first name. In your public YouTube channel, Health Science Center denies access to mother while daughter is in MICU, published to your YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, The Shame of Canada, on January 31st, 2023. You identify the patient relations officer and two other staff members at the Health Science Center by full name. Well, again, it's my right to speak out. And I mean, hey, if my choices are to be a social worker or give up my Canadian rights, well, or sorry, if my choice is to be a social worker and give up my Canadian rights, or not be a social worker and keep my Canadian rights, I'll keep my Canadian rights, thanks, and the Manitoba College of Social Workers can go take a long walk off a short pier for all I care. Um, okay, so in public, I think we were on G. In public YouTube video, my daughter is out of ICU, published to your YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, The Shame of Canada, on February 9th, 2023. You identify a nurse at the Health Science Center by first name and unit manager at the Health Sciences Center by full name. In public YouTube video, Health Science Center refuses access to mom while daughter lays in the hospital bed on GD4. Published to your YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, The Shame of Canada, on February 10th, 2023. You identify the unit manager and public relations officer at Health Science Center by full name, as well as the Health Science Center social worker by full name. I'm just going to check something. Oh, yeah. Okay. You made and published the video on your public YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, The Shame of Canada, and identified the named nurses, a nurse manager, a unit manager, social worker, and patient relations officer, and other staff at Health Science Center in your public videos, and advised the hospital about your YouTube channel and the videos for the purpose of wanting the hospital staff to know and understand your perspective. Yeah, because they wouldn't talk to me. All right. So, um And then it says, two, you failed to distinguish between actions and statements made as a private citizen, actions and statements made by a social worker contrary to Code Ethics 7, Ethical Responsibilities of Profession, specifically Clause 718. So again, we're going to go over to the Code of Ethics and look that one up, and I'll read you out what it says. Um, it says, social workers distinguish between actions and statements made as a private citizen and actions and statements made as a social worker, recognizing that social workers are obligated to ensure that no outside interests bring profession into disrepute. All right, so I'm a mom who was visiting her daughter. Now, this is a warning to all professionals who are visiting health science center with their family members that these nurses can call up your college or your regulatory body if they don't like, if you call what they're doing into question, if you see that they're not giving your family member the proper care, if you don't like their behavior towards you, this is a warning for you, because what this document is saying is patient families have no rights. They don't have the right to call nurses out on what they're doing, because these nurses can then go to their regulatory bodies in their professional life. You're not there as a professional. You're there with your family member. Clearly personal, right? And you shouldn't have to say, I'm here in a personal capacity. You're with your family. Of course it's personal. I mean, if if somebody cannot figure out that if you're with your family it's personal, then they've got bigger issues than trying to distinguish between personal and professional, because that calls into question if they have common sense or not. I'm sorry, but it does. But what this clause says, social workers distinguish between actions and statements made in private as a private citizen and actions and statements made as a social worker. Okay, I'm out with my kids. Before I talk to anybody, I'm not going to go and say to them, just so you know, I'm acting as a private citizen right now. Every single person I cross on the street is the college really telling me I have to say I can't talk to you unless I first say I'm acting as a private citizen and not a social worker in this moment. If you're not getting paid, if it doesn't affect your clients, you're not acting in a professional capacity. You're acting in a personal capacity. And I mean, the fact that this is even being questioned is ridiculous. Recognizing that social workers are obligated to ensure that no outside interests bring the profession into disrepute. Well, you know what? The fact that this is coming to me in the form of a hearing where I could be penalized, the college is bringing itself into disrepute because it is punishing me for my personal life. Okay, going into the particulars now. In your public YouTube video, camera recording 28 December 2022, published to your YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, The Shame of Canada, on December 29, 2022, you identify yourself twice as a registered social worker with the Manitoba College of Social Workers. I did. It is part of who I am. Just because a doctor is walking down the street, that doesn't mean he's working. It doesn't mean that he, in that moment, while he's walking his dog in and walking with his kids, it doesn't mean that he's practicing. It doesn't mean that he's acting as a professional in that capacity. But doctor is part of his name, just like my designations are part of my name. Also, I wanted the hospital to know that despite what Elizabeth Miasga and Owen Johnson may have told them, I do have a head on my shoulders. And I'm not a dummy. So, I mean, if whatever nonsense that they're telling told these nurses to only allow me 2 hours, well, I'm sure these nurses now are regretting that decision because um I'm not letting this go. Like this what I'm doing is not just going to be affecting myself. It affects everybody. Like if you have a family member in hospital and some um you're how many family members or no, sorry, I'm saying this wrong. How many families have family members that you don't get along with? Now these family members you don't get along with, say your kid is in hospital and these family members go to the hospital and say, "Oh, she's not a good person. Oh, she's not this or that." Right? No, I work as a social worker. I work with vulnerable people. I'm clearly no threat. Give me access to my kid. That was the purpose of it. In In your public YouTube video, Health Sciences Center, Mother Access to Daughter in MICU Followed Weekend of Discrimination, published to your YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, A Shame of Canada, on January 2020 or 23rd, 2023, you identify yourself as a social worker. Why shouldn't I? It's part of my designation. It is part of who I am. It doesn't mean I'm acting as a social worker in that capacity. It means I am a social worker. In evoking your status as a social worker in your public YouTube video post, camera recording 28 December 2022, the Health Science Center denies mother access to daughter in MICU following weekend of discrimination. Published to your public YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, A Shame of Canada, you obscured the boundaries between actions and statements you've made as a private citizen and actions and statements made as a social worker. I don't agree with that. A social worker is who I am. It is my designation. If a doctor speaks out in public and everybody has an opinion, it is our personal opinion. It is protected by the Constitution. Freedom of speech again. So if a doctor doesn't say, "Oh, well, as a doctor, I'm not acting in a professional capacity right now." A doctor doesn't have to do that in order to state an opinion, and neither should a social worker. I mean, this what this statement is saying is that as a social worker, we do not have the right to opinions. We do not have the right to speak out. We do not have the right to Canadian rights and freedoms of freedom of speech. That is what this statement is saying. On January 23rd, 2023, you sent an email with a link to your YouTube video. Health Science Center only allows parents up to 2 hours a day with daughter who is in MICU, located to your YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, The Shame of Canada, to Health Science Center, Patient Relations, Shared Health Media, Winnipeg Free Press, Standard Arrow, and Cineplex. In the signature line of your email, you identify yourself as a registered social worker, and in the body indicated, if anyone wants an interview, please contact me. A registered social worker, that was my designation. I'm not gonna deny who I am simply because I have an opinion. And again, my daughter was in hospital. It was a personal situation. If um if people cannot understand that, well, again, they've got bigger issues. And a social worker, what the college is essentially saying is a social worker does not have the same Canadian rights as every other person. Um, Only after the complaint was made and you provide and provided to you did you on February 23rd, 2023 publish the YouTube video Who Am I and what I am personally going through versus my work as a social worker to your YouTube channel, Manitoba Family Systems, The Shame of Canada, in which you clarify the statements you made in previous YouTube videos you were not as a social worker. I will always be a social worker. That is a designation that even the college can't take away from me. The only thing they can take away from me is whether I'm registered or not. Now, I went to university. I earned that degree. They can't take that away from me. Um, but what they can do is penalize me and take away my registration with the college. Um, Now I'm not going to back down on this because, again, this speaks to the rights of Canadians. Do professionals have the same rights as all other Canadians? That is what this document is about. It's not about whether I was professional or not. Clearly, I'm not going to be acting as a professional when I'm work when I'm with my daughter or trying to see my daughter who's dying or who literally I was told might not make it through the night. Clearly, I'm not going to be acting in a professional capacity there. But what this document is saying is do professionals who who are registered with with a regulatory body have the same rights as every other Canadian? You failed to ensure that your outside interests and actions do not bring the profession into disrepute, contrary to Code of Ethics Guideline 7, Ethical Responsibilities to Profession, specifically Clause 718, and the Code of Ethics value integrity in professional practice. Okay, so 718. I think that's one of the ones we just did that one. So same thing applies of what I just said. Um, it basically is saying it basically the question really is, do social workers in Canada have the same rights as every other Canadian? Do are our Canadian are we being forced to give up our Canadian right to freedom of speech or be a professional? Is that actually a choice that is being forced upon us? Okay, so Code of Ethics value 4. So let's scroll up there and we'll read that. Um Sorry, just give me a second in here. Okay, so this one I'm going to read all of it out because and again, I'll post the link to this in the chat in the um in the text box below, where I make my notes usually. I'll post the link to this so people can read it later. But guideline 4, ethical responsibilities to workplace. Social workers acknowledge and strive to carry out statement aims and objectives of their employing organization, agency, or service contractor consistent with requirement of ethical practice. Well, again, I wasn't acting in a professional capacity, and um, it didn't impact my employer at all. In fact, this entire document doesn't have a single word in respects to my employer, any clients, or anybody who I've conducted business with. Social workers are not this document, but the document that was served to me. Um, the document that you guys are actually looking at. Um, so for 1.2, social workers work towards the best possible standard of service provision and are accountable for their practice. Again, I don't see how I violated any of this because it it didn't nothing in this document that was served to me relates to my work whatsoever. Social workers use the organization's resource honestly and only for their intended purpose. Of course, but at the same time, um, I was not working and I did not use any resources from the organization um, in my personal life. Social workers appropriately challenged and work to improve policies, procedures, practices, and service provisions that are not in the best interest of clients, are inequitable, are in any way oppressive, disempowering, or culturally inappropriate, and demonstrate discrimination. Okay, so this one I find kind of interesting because again, it applies to workplace practice, right? Professional practice. But I was not acting in a professional capacity when I was at the hospital. I was, sorry, one moment. I was acting personally being with my daughter. So this whole guideline thing doesn't even apply. But I'm going to stop at this point because I find this extremely interesting. Are in any way oppressive, disempowering, or culturally inappropriate and demonstrates discrimination. So I'm a parent, my daughter's in hospital, she's fighting for her life. I was the sole person taking her to all her appointments for 20 plus years, and I'm not allowed to see my daughter. How is that not discrimination? Are oppressive. Do you have any idea how much stress I was under? Knowing that my daughter could be in hospital, or knowing that my daughter was in hospital, that she was fighting for her life, that the hospital already had given her a medication that sent her into an allergic reaction where they had to induce a medical coma, a medically induced coma. And I was being forced to stay away from her while they used her as a friggin' guinea pig. And I mean, I'm sorry, but that is the reality of what the situation was. And I mean, she was being used as a guinea pig. I had the knowledge. I could have told them what she was allergic to. I could have been there to help. I could have said, okay, this may not be the best situation. Like, try this is what the medication that was used in the past that worked. But they wouldn't even talk to me. How is that not oppressive for both me and her? How is that both disempowering for both her and me? How is that also not culturally appropriate or culturally inappropriate sorry, to force a parent away from their child during a time when their child clearly can't speak for themselves? When policies, sorry, 4.15, when, so, actually, I'm going to go back to that one. So, even though I wasn't working in a professional capacity at that point, I was still advocating for myself and my daughter. And, if they're going to penalize me for speaking out, perhaps they should read this code of ethics because my advocacy has been entirely around how my human rights, how my Canadian rights have been violated, how I have been oppressed, disempowered, how culturally inappropriate it is to um, rob somebody of their family. I mean, and how this whole situation demonstrates discrimination. I mean, that is the heart of my advocacy is letting people know what has happened to me or the steps I have taken and how human rights and Canadian rights in Manitoba, in Canada, are repeatedly being violated. And this whole panel, this whole hearing again speaks to that, because what it's saying is that as a social worker, I don't have the rights of every other Canadian out there. And the reality is every other Canadian out there, they're probably at one point or another going to get their human rights and their Canadian rights stomped on as well, because unfortunately that is the way our country is going. Um, when policies or procedures of employed body convey professional standard, okay, when policies or procedures of employed bodies, this complaint is not being um, this complaint is not being made by my employer. And also, I wasn't working during this time. I took some personal leave to go see my daughter, meaning I was not on working time. Um so the fact of the matter is that this whole thing, I mean, they're trying what they're trying to do is they're trying to back me into a corner so that they can rob me of my designation, rob me of um, and penalize me further. But the reality is, they're going to have to what they're going to have to answer for is, um, as a social worker, does social workers have the same rights as every other Canadian? And what okay, so this whole section, right at the top, it says professional practice. So when is a social worker not allowed to be professional? Are they not are Do they have to be professional in their own home, on their own property? Do they have to be professional on a beach while they're in the water in a bikini? Do they have to be professional while out with friends having drinks, or out having a coffee? When when are they allowed to be human? When are they allowed to have a time for their personal life? When are they allowed time to take care of themselves? And are they allowed to be just themselves in a hospital with their child? Is that not allowed? Is being a professional Does being a professional mean that when you're in the hospital room with a potentially dying family member, because I was told she might not make it through the night, when you're sitting by your child's bedside and you're not sure if she's going to live to see tomorrow, does the college, does professional regulatory bodies expect you to be professional in that moment? That is what is actually being called into question here. Um, and I Okay, so getting back to this, 4.16, social workers take all reasonable steps to ensure that employers are aware of their professional ethics obligation and advocate for conditions and policies that reflect ethical professional practices. Again, it speaks about employers. Health Sciences Center, the nurses at Health Science Center, they're not my employers. So the fact that this guideline is in this document, um, again, it kind of calls into question the whole thing. Social workers take social workers take all reasonable steps to uphold their ethical values, principles, and responsibilities, even through employers' policies and official orders may not be compatible with its provisions. Again, it speaks to employers. Shared Health, Health Science Center, the nurses, the doctors are not my employers. This does not apply. Um, Then it talks about 4.2 is labor management disputes. Again, health science center, the nurses, the doctors, they don't they don't weren't employing me. So I mean this section is kind of irrelevant, but just for laughs, let's read it anyways. Social workers may engage in organized action, including the formation and the participation in labor unions to improve services, clients, and professional wages and working conditions. Doesn't apply. The actions of social workers who are involved in labor management disputes, job actions, and labor strikes are guided by the professional values and principles, reasonable differences and opinions existing among social workers concerning their primary obligations and professional during an actual threatened labor strike and job action. Social workers carefully examine relevant issues and their possible impacts on clients before deciding on a course of action. Okay, there's nothing remotely in there that would apply to the situation at Health Science Center or honestly, I think they're just throwing things in, thinking that I wouldn't know what they like that I wouldn't know how to argue this. And if I didn't know how to argue it, I wouldn't be a very good social worker. But at the same time, I know my Canadian rights. I know my human rights. And the fact of the matter is there was no labor management dispute. There was no professional practice ethical there like guideline 4 is all about ethical responsibilities to the workplace. But I was not in a workplace when um when I was talking about health sciences center, or I wasn't working at all during um the making of the video or when I was visiting or seeing my child. And then 4.3 is responsibilities to managers. um you know what, I'm not going to waste time going through all this. I was going to, but I'm not going to waste time going through all this. um because realistically, you know what, no, we will go through this really quickly, but I'm going to make do it really fast because it's all workplace related, and I wasn't in a workplace. The nurse isn't my employer, the doctor isn't my employer, health sciences center isn't my employer, shared health isn't my employer. I was there in a personal capacity. In addition to general provisions of code of ethics, guidelines, and ethical practice, social workers may manage their similar administrative positions are guided by the following specific ethical responsibilities. Social workers equate or organizational administration with ethical responsibilities of social workers. Social workers encourage employers to eliminate workplace factors that prohibit or obstruct adherence to ethical practice. Social workers strive to promote effective teamwork and communication and efficient and accountable social work services. Social work strive to obtain and maintain adequate staff levels and acceptable work conditions. Social workers strive to facilitate access to appropriate professional consultation or supervision for professional social work practice. Social workers strive to facilitate access for staff under their direction to ongoing training and professional education and advocate for adequate resources to meet staff development needs. Social workers provide or arrange for appropriate debriefing and professional support for staff, especially when the experience difficult or traumatic circumstances. So again, absolutely nothing there related to what we are discussing. Um, I think they honestly just threw that in to hmm, interesting. I just wanted to see one thing here before we continue. because oh shoot, I think I read the wrong thing. Okay, just give me a second because I got to figure out where. Okay, so value 4 talks about integrity of professional practice. And it says, see section 2, ethical responsibilities in professional relationships. Okay, now, where I guess I will read this part. So, this is why I said that we might have to do this in a few parts because, um, okay, ethical responsibilities in professional relationships. Um, It is the responsibility of a social worker to establish and tender their professional relationships with clients and others, to ensure that their relationship serves the needs of the clients and others who perform there is a professional duty over the needs of the social worker. Okay, so right in that one sentence, to ensure the relationship serves the needs of the clients. In this situation, there was no client. Holly had a client. Her client was my daughter. And um it should have been it should have been my daughter, but she should have been able to maintain uh, a relationship for me with me as well. Now, from my perspective, I was not there in a professional capacity. I was there in a personal capacity. I was not with a client in this situation. There was no client on my end. I was there with I was there to see my daughter. So this a whole like we'll continue reading this, but this section, it doesn't apply because in this capacity there was no professional relationships for me. The relationship, there was no client, there was no employer, there was nobody that I was interacting with that served my profession in any shape, way, or form. So there was no professional relationship on my end. I think the college is just trying to throw this in, or the lawyers at the college are just trying to throw this in because, of course, it looks bad for me if they try to break down the ethical responsibilities of professional relationships, right? I mean, but the thing that they are failing to realize is, from my end, there was no professional relationships. I was not there as in the capacity of a social worker. I was there in the capacity of a parent. And so clearly it was a personal situation. There was no client, there was no employer, and there was nobody that um was was there in the capacity of working with any of my clients. So there was no professional relationships whatsoever. In establishing a professional relationship, the social worker takes into account relevant contextual issues such as age, culture, gender of client, and ensures the dignity, individuality, rights of the person and the vulnerable member of society are protected. Again, there was no client. It was my daughter and me. Like Sure, from Holly's perspective, there was a client, and my daughter would have been her client. But from my perspective, like, keep in mind, it's not her getting the College of Nurses didn't do absolutely anything in regards to what she did. But I'm being penalized professionally for my personal relationship, wanting to be at the hospital with my daughter. And um the fact that the college is using this guideline um also calls into question a few things. Are social workers not allowed to have personal relationships? Are we not allowed to have personal relationships with our family members, our friends, our um and people in the community? I mean, clearly we're not allowed to have professional or relationships with clients, but the fact of the matter is that Holly was not an employer. She was not a colleague. There was no client from my end. So, I mean, there was no professional relationship whatsoever. So this whole section is um is inappropriate. But we're going to read it over anyways, simply because um they're using this in this document. So I kind of want to go over all this and um kind of shoot down anything that they think that they've got on me. Social workers maintain appropriate professional boundaries throughout the course of their professional relationship and after the professional relationship. All right, but there was no professional relationship. I was a parent in the hospital with trying to gain access to her daughter, and there was no client, there was no employer. I mean, yes, I am a I do have a professional designation. Yes, Holly has a professional designation. That doesn't mean that there was a professional relationship. Two people can be professionals crossing on the street. It doesn't mean that they have a relationship. Um, no exploitation of personal or professional gain. Social workers do not exploit professional relationships for benefit, personal benefit, gain, or gratification. Again, there was no personal or professional relationship. Professional relationship implies that we both have a client that is similar, or we're both working in the same workplace, or we're both communicating in regards to a common um, a common work interest. I was there in a personal capacity. She was there in a professional capacity. There was no professional relationship. A professional relationship means you're both there on a professional level. That did not happen. Um, Social workers do not take unfair advantage of professional relationships or exploit others to further their personal, religious, political, or business interests. Okay, so again, there was no professional relationship. Um, I didn't exploit anybody. Exploiting somebody meant that I gained something while they lost something. I gained absolutely nothing, and um, and they lost absolutely nothing. They may have. The only thing that they could probably argue is, um, I did I did post about it, and I am speaking out about it. But again, that is my Canadian right as a Canadian. If the college is going to penalize me and say I exploited somebody by speaking out, well, you know, then you're basically saying that as a social worker, I'm not. permitted the same rights as every other Canadian. Um, Declare conflict of interest. Social workers avoid conflict of interest that interfere with the exercise of professional discretion and impartial judgment. Social workers inform clients when a real or potential conflict of interest arises and takes reasonable steps to involve or resolve the issue in a manner that makes the client's interest primary. In some cases, protects clients' interests may require termination of the professional relationship with proper referral of client to another professional. Okay, so again, there was no client. I was not there in a professional capacity, so there was no professional relationship. And there was no conflict of interest. However, I did call patient advocacy, I called patient relations, and nobody wanted to talk to me. So yeah, the next step would have been to the media. And I did exactly what a lot of other parents have done in the past. Um and then it goes into just I'm not gonna read all this because if the college wants to penalize me for um, a professional relationship, I would ask that they prove that a professional relationship existed. And they're not going to be able to because Holly and I we never had the same clients. We never worked in the same workplace. We didn't have the same employer. We didn't converse with the same people. So there is no professional relationship. And there wasn't even a client. We don't even have a mutual client. So I mean, realistically, this whole thing is kind of um it's it doesn't make a lot of sense. Um Ethical, okay, so section it also talks about section 3 ethical responsibilities to um colleagues. So let's go to that one. Uh Social works relate to both social work colleagues and colleagues from other disciplines with respect, integrity, and courtesy, and seek to understand differences and viewpoints in practice. Well, I did seek. I called patient relations, I called patient advocacy, and then I went public because they weren't and you know, I did I I did my utmost to try and resolve things. Um And I mean, I even went to the College of Nurses, and I went to the College of Social Workers. I think I still have emails to the College of Social Workers asking them for help in this matter because um, the patient advocacy um, had a social worker there by the name of Heather who was registered with the college, and I went to the college and I asked them for help in this matter, help trying to navigate the situation. So the fact that I'm now being penalized for this situation when I didn't get any assistance, I did everything I could. Um, Collaboration and consultation. When and you know what? Realistically, um, this guideline it is a guideline, right? It's not legislation, it's not something set in stone, but what is set in stone is a Canadian's right to family. What is set in stone is their right